The autumn light filtered through the massive windows of the View studio, casting everything in that golden New York glow that made even coffee mugs look cinematic. The audience settled into their seats with an electric anticipation. Prince Harry and Emma Stone sharing the same table was the kind of pairing that made morning television feel like an event. Whoopi Goldberg adjusted her glasses and grinned at the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got quite the show today. Please welcome Prince Harry, here to talk about his latest humanitarian project, and our special co-host, the incomparable Emma Stone." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The applause was thunderous. Harry entered with that practiced royal wave, all charm and carefully groomed confidence. He shook hands with each panelist, his smile never wavering. When he reached Emma, she stood gracefully, her handshake firm, her smile warm, but with something sharper flickering behind her eyes. "So good to have you both here," Whoopi continued as they settled. "Harry, tell us about this new project of yours." Harry leaned forward, his voice carrying that familiar blend of passion and privilege. "It's really about bringing communities together in tough times, showing people that resilience is possible, that we can pull through anything if we just support each other." Emma nodded, her fingers wrapped around her coffee mug. "That's beautiful," she said, tilting her head slightly. "When you say, pull through anything, what kinds of struggles are you thinking about specifically?" Something in her tone, not hostile but probing, made Harry pause for just a fraction of a second. The audience leaned forward imperceptibly. The morning was about to take an unexpected turn. The studio's controlled temperature couldn't cool the subtle shift in atmosphere. Emma's question hung in the air like morning fog, seemingly innocent but weighted with something more. Harry maintained his composure, gesturing with practiced ease. "Well, I've met people facing all sorts of challenges: unemployment, health crises, family struggles. What strikes me is that the human spirit is remarkably adaptable. Resilience really is a choice we make." Emma's eyebrows lifted almost imperceptibly. Sunny Hostin shifted in her chair, sensing the undercurrent. The audience, initially buzzing with excitement, had gone quieter, their attention laser-focused on this unexpected philosophical ping-pong match. "A choice," Emma repeated, her voice thoughtful. "That's interesting. Do you think privilege plays a role in our ability to make that choice? Like, does having a safety net change how we bounce back from setbacks?" Harry's smile tightened just a degree. He leaned forward, then back again, clearly recalibrating. "Well, Emma, I appreciate the Hollywood struggle story, but—" The words hung in the air like smoke. The audience went dead silent. Several people visibly winced. Emma's expression remained neutral, but her grip on her coffee mug tightened. "Of course," she said carefully, "and your courage in making that decision is admirable. I'm just wondering if someone choosing between paying rent and buying groceries might face a different kind of resilience test than someone with, say, a Netflix deal as a backup." Harry attempted to redirect, his media training kicking in. "The project really focuses on practical support." But Emma wasn't done. "Because I think sometimes when we talk about choice and resilience, we might accidentally suggest that people struggling are just not choosing hard enough." The elephant had entered the room, and everyone could see it. The studio lights seemed brighter now, every facial expression magnified. Emma leaned forward slightly, her voice gaining strength without losing its measured tone. "When I was starting out, I remember choosing between acting classes and groceries. Not metaphorically, literally standing in a store doing math in my head. And I was lucky. I had family who could help if I truly couldn't eat. But some of my friends didn't." She paused, letting the personal revelation settle. So when I hear about resilience being a choice, I think about Maria, who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford her daughter's asthma medication. Was she just not choosing hard enough? Harry's practiced smile wavered. He leaned back, then forward again, clearly recalibrating. Well, Emma, I appreciate the Hollywood struggle story, but... The words hung in the air like smoke. The audience went dead silent. Several people visibly winced. Emma's expression vanished completely, not replaced by anger, but with something more dangerous: clarity. Hollywood struggle? She repeated, her voice dropping to a conversational whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. Harry, I just told you about friends who couldn't afford medication for their sick children. Whoopi's eyes widened. She recognized the moment when polite television died and something real began. Emma continued, each word precisely placed. That's the difference between empathy and observation, Harry. Empathy listens. Observation just watches. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of reckoning. The audience held its breath, phones slowly emerging from purses and pockets. This wasn't the morning show they'd signed up for. It was something better, something true. Whoopi cleared her throat, a veteran host's instinct to steer away from the iceberg. Well, let's talk about solutions. But Harry wasn't backing down. His jaw set with that particular royal stubbornness that had gotten him into trouble before. Look, Emma, I understand you want to make this personal, but struggle is universal. I've sat with veterans who've lost everything, families torn apart by war, people who... Harry. Emma's voice cut through his momentum like a blade through silk. I'm not making it personal. You are. Every time someone challenges your perspective, you retreat into your charity work like it's armor. The audience was riveted now. Phones were out, recording everything. This wasn't morning television. It was a masterclass in public accountability. Harry leaned forward, his charm cracking visibly. That's not fair. I've dedicated my life to visiting struggle, Emma interrupted, her voice steady as steel. There's a difference between witnessing poverty and living paycheck to paycheck, between touring a homeless shelter and sleeping on a friend's couch because you can't make rent. Sunny Hostin nodded slightly. Her prosecutor instincts recognized a well-constructed argument. The audience murmured, some in agreement, others in discomfort at watching their beloved prince being dissected on live television. Harry's face flushed. He leaned back, then forward again, clearly recalibrating. Well, Emma, I appreciate that they are doing so much. The air crackled with tension that no commercial break could cure. Harry's composure finally cracked. He straightened in his chair, that royal bearing emerging like armor. You know what, Emma? It's easy to sit here and critique from the sidelines, but what are you actually doing about it? The question hit the studio like a thunderclap. For a split second, Emma looked genuinely surprised, not by the attack, but by how clumsy it was. She smiled then, not the Hollywood smile, but something more dangerous, something real. I'm glad you asked, she said, her voice carrying that calm that comes before devastation. Because when I made it, I didn't just donate to charity. I started a scholarship fund specifically for kids whose parents work multiple jobs. Kids who might have to choose between college and keeping the lights on at home. The audience stirred. This wasn't in the pre-interview notes. Emma continued, each word measured and precise. I also lobbied for the California Fair Pay Act. Not a photo op, Harry, actual policy work. Because proximity to struggle isn't the same as understanding it. Harry's face went from flushed to pale. That's admirable, but what? Emma's voice remained steady, conversational, lethal. Because I'm an actress? Because I didn't grow up in a palace? The audience gasped, actual gasps. Phones were buzzing with notifications as clips already started hitting social media. Harry leaned forward, his voice tight. That's a bit unfair, don't you think?
Emma tilted her head, studying him like a specimen under glass. "Harry, you just questioned what I'm actually doing about systemic inequality after I told you about friends who couldn't afford their children's medication. And you think I'm being unfair?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even Whoopi seemed stunned in the stillness. Then Harry made his fatal mistake. Easy to criticize from a chair in the studio. The studio erupted. Emma didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move at all for a heartbeat that felt eternal. When she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that everyone had to lean in to hear her. It's easier still to speak about struggle when you've never had to choose between rent and food. The room exploded. Not just applause, cheers. People stood up. The camera operators exchanged glances, knowing they were capturing television history. Harry's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, something that might have been shame. His hands gripped the edge of the table like he was holding on for dear life. Whoopi raised her eyebrows and made a decision that would define her legacy. She let the moment breathe. Let the applause wash over the studio. Let America see a prince being held accountable by someone who refused to bow. When the noise finally died down, Emma wasn't gloating. She wasn't even smiling. She just sat there, poised and unshakable, waiting. Harry's voice, when it came, was smaller than before. "I've worked with people who—" "Emma?" Emma's interruption was gentle now, almost kind. "Working with people and being those people are different things. And until you understand that difference, your charity work is just tourism." The audience drew a collective breath. On social media, #CharityTourism began trending within minutes. Harry stared at her, his royal training warring with genuine bewilderment. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, charm wasn't working, privilege wasn't protecting him, and the cameras were rolling. Sunny Hostin leaned forward slightly, her lawyer's instincts sensing blood in the water. "Harry, do you want to respond to that?" He looked around the table, at Whoopi's knowing expression, at Sunny's expectant face, at Emma's unwavering calm. "Maybe," he said quietly. "We should wrap this up." The admission of defeat was so sudden, so complete, that the audience went silent again. This time, Emma did smile. But it wasn't triumphant. It was sad. Harry's suggestion to wrap up hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, but Emma wasn't done. Not yet. She leaned back in her chair, studying him with the patience of someone who had been underestimated her entire career. "Harry, you asked what I'm doing about it. Now I'm asking you the same question. Beyond the photo ops and the speeches, what systemic changes are you actually fighting for?" The audience held its breath. This was surgical now, precise. Harry straightened, grasping for his training. "My foundation has raised millions." "For what policies?" Emma interrupted smoothly. "Which legislators have you lobbied? What bills have you supported that would actually change the systems that create the struggles you're so passionate about touring?" The questions came like a machine gun, each one finding its mark. Harry's mouth opened, then closed. His team in the wings was probably having a collective heart attack. Sunny Hostin leaned forward slightly, her lawyer's instincts sensing blood in the water. "Harry, do you want to respond to that?" He looked around the table, at Whoopi's knowing expression, at Sunny's expectant face, at Emma's unwavering calm. "We can work with governments," he stammered. "Working with and working to change are different things," Emma said gently. "You can raise money for homeless shelters, or you can fight for housing policy. You can fund mental health programs, or you can lobby for healthcare reform. One treats symptoms, the other treats causes." The studio was dead silent except for the soft clicks of phone cameras. Emma's voice remained conversational, almost kind, which somehow made every word more devastating. "The truth is, Harry, it's easier to be a charity prince than a policy advocate, because charity preserves the system that made you relevant in the first place." Harry's face went through a rainbow of emotions. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with frustration. "So nothing I do matters?" Emma's expression softened slightly. "It matters to the people you help directly, but it doesn't matter to the system that created their need for it in the first place. The studio felt smaller now, like the walls had moved closer during the confrontation. Harry sat back, deflated, his royal composure completely shattered. For a moment, he looked less like a prince and more like what he was, a privileged man who had never been challenged so thoroughly in public. Maybe this conversation is more about making points than making progress. It was meant to be his escape hatch, a way to frame Emma as aggressive, performative, but Emma had been waiting for exactly this moment.
Harry, you came here to talk about bringing communities together, but you haven't listened to a single thing I've said about what those communities actually need. You've defended, deflected, and dismissed, and now you want to end the conversation when it gets uncomfortable. The audience was riveted. Phones were blazing with notifications as clips spread like wildfire across every platform. Emma's voice dropped to that deadly quiet register. If you're not willing to listen, the crown is just decoration. The audience erupted. The applause was thunderous, sustained, defiant. People stood up, cheering not just for a clever line, but for a moment of truth that cut through years of polite deference. Harry stared at her, his mouth slightly open. The cameras caught every micro-expression, the shock, the anger, the dawning realization that he had just been publicly dismantled by someone who refused to be impressed by his title. Whoopi's eyes sparkled with something between admiration and disbelief. In 30 years of television, she had rarely seen someone so calmly, systematically, and completely destroy another person's argument. Emma sat back, completely composed, sipping her coffee like she hadn't just delivered the line that would define this decade of television. Harry looked around the table one more time, then at the cheering audience, then back at Emma. No words came. "We'll be right back," Whoopi announced, and the red recording light went dark. The studio erupted in a different way now. Whispered conversations, excited murmurs, the distinctive buzz of people who knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Audience members were already posting to social media, their phones lighting up the dimmed studio like a constellation of digital stars. Emma stood up calmly, straightening her blazer. She walked to the craft services table and picked up a bottle of water, moving with the same grace she'd shown throughout the entire confrontation. No victory lap, no gloating, just the quiet confidence of someone who had said what needed to be said. Meanwhile, Harry sat frozen in his chair, staring at the table. His handlers materialized from the wings like Secret Service agents, whispering urgently in his ear. One of them showed him a phone screen. Twitter was already exploding. #CrownJustDecoration was trending worldwide within minutes. The clip of Emma's final line had been viewed 500,000 times before the commercial break ended. Think pieces were already being drafted. Hot takes were flying faster than the speed of light. On TikTok, Gen Z was having a field day. Emma Stone just ended the monarchy with one sentence. When she said, "The crown is just decoration," I felt that in my soul. Harry really thought his charm would work on someone who grew up working class in Arizona. Back in the studio, Sunny Hostin caught Emma's eye and gave her a subtle thumbs up. Whoopi was reviewing her notes, probably trying to figure out how to bring the show back from the stratosphere Emma had just launched it into. Harry finally stood up, his team still buzzing around him like concerned bees. He looked across the studio at Emma, who was now chatting quietly with a production assistant about her upcoming film. She didn't look back. When the cameras rolled again, Harry's smile was plastered on like makeup, but his eyes told a different story. The interview limped to its conclusion with awkward small talk about autumn in New York. But everyone knew what they'd really come to see was already over. 3 days later, the world was still talking. The views ratings hit a 5-year high. The clip had been viewed 47 million times across all platforms. Late-night comedians dedicated entire monologues to the Crown incident. Academic papers were already being written about celebrity accountability in the digital age. Emma Stone's Instagram gained 2 million followers overnight. Her post, a simple black-and-white photo of a library book about economic inequality with the caption, "Education over decoration," broke the platform's engagement records.
Harry's team issued a carefully crafted statement about productive dialogue and learning opportunities. But the damage was surgical and complete. His next 3 speaking engagements were quietly postponed. Royal biographers were frantically updating manuscripts. More importantly, the conversation had shifted. #charity tourism sparked a broader discussion about performative activism versus systemic change. Major foundations found themselves defending their approaches. Politicians were asked harder questions about celebrity endorsements. Emma's scholarship fund saw a 1,000% increase in donations. Applications flooded in from kids whose parents worked multiple jobs, exactly the demographic she'd spoken about. Real change was happening because someone had finally said the quiet part out loud. At award shows, hosts made jokes about crowns being decorative. The phrase entered the cultural lexicon overnight, shorthand for pointing out when privilege masqueraded as understanding. Hollywood took notice too. Emma's next film saw a massive surge in pre-sales. Directors who had been on the fence about working with her suddenly found themselves very interested. Standing up to power, it turned out, was good business. 6 months later, when The View won its Emmy for Outstanding Talk Show, Whoopi's acceptance speech was brief. Sometimes the best television happens when we stop protecting people from the truth. Emma wasn't at the ceremony. She was in Arizona, visiting her old high school, announcing a new program for first-generation college students. No cameras, no fanfare, just the work. The crown, after all, was just decoration. The real power lay in knowing the difference. If you liked the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.